Mary Poppinstein. Chapter 1. She had always been so reserved. A kind, gentle, delicate, and proper English girl. Reminded daily of how important it was to be perfect in every way. Confined to the invisible box her father, and perhaps to some extent society, had placed her in. Mary had to pretend she was normal, drab, typical, colorless, and boring, like everyone else. But truth be told, Mary wasn't like everyone else. Mary was special. How desperately she wanted people to see how special she was, to show the world her capabilities and wonders. Oh, that was the desire. Within her was something magical. There's no other way to describe it, and the magic she possessed, it would dazzle the most stoic of skeptics. But alas, she was never allowed to show other people her true self. No one. Her father was adamant about that rule. Regardless of her crying, her begging, her logic, his demands were unwavering. "Be like them," he replied. "Draw no attention to yourself. Be a good girl, and no one will notice you." What a thing to say to a girl such as Mary. A girl who could do literally anything. Who could defy gravity. Who could make dreams come true. Any dreams but her own. She was no longer a girl, either. The way the world pulsed from her father's lips infuriated her. One was no longer a girl at the age of 19, Mary would often think to herself. Plus, the times were indeed changing at a rapid pace. It was 1923! People shouldn't have to be so droll, so insulated, so limited. If there had been no restrictions placed upon her, Mary could have changed the world. She was smart enough. Smarter than any boy or man she knew. And she had the sense of determination for it. She knew that as well. There was nary a task she set her mind to at which she did not excel. But father couldn't see this. He could never see anything positive when it came to Mary. As she walked those busy streets of London, it occurred to her that none of these people could see anything special about her. They walked past her without a second glance or an initial thought. Some even looked down upon her merely because she was a woman, and the foolish stigma that the world had placed upon that condition. Some even looked down upon her because of another condition she was afflicted with. Beauty. In a booming metropolis. Shut up. In a booming metropolis, no one could see her worth. And on the crowded streets of the heart of the English Empire, Mary felt so very alone. And that, Mary had decided, was her father's fault. She could show him. She could show them all, she thought. She could stop right there on the walkway and strip her clothes off. She could baffle the city with her beauty, her body, and her magic. The thought made her smile. Imagining the faces of the local gawkers, it would be priceless. But court proceedings after, having been arrested for public indecency, might have cost a sultry 6 pence. Sultry 6 pence. Tragic, though. The show would have been stirring. She could have done anything, colors in the sky, the whole of the West End silenced and still as their gazes undulated between the fireworks above and her pale porcelain body on the streets. She was proud of her body, skin white as clouds lined with curves. Some mornings, she would take her time dressing, spending her moments studying and admiring herself in a full-body mirror. Her bright pink... Whew! This is so awkward. Her bright pink nipples always seemed to be eager in the morning. She thought they had a cheerful disposition. Her happy little nipples. And sadly, no man had ever touched them. It wasn't proper for perfect girls to consort before marriage. But then again, it wasn't proper for perfect girls to stand in front of a dressing mirror and admire their derrieres and the pink hue a self-inflicted slap would give them. Yet that didn't stop the young Mary Poppins. If it was forbidden for young English girls to have sex before marriage, then it was the fruit of Eden for Mary, and what a shame. Mary could have any man she wanted. She could have as many men as she wanted. Maybe that's how she could change her father's steadfast rules. She could go out, make love to a few men, and destroy his notion of the perfectly placed, in a perfect box, good girl, in one fell swoop. She had only read about sex in books. She had read about practically everything, though, to be honest. Her thirst for knowledge was insatiable, but she had another thirst as well. Even though her knowledge of things carnal was at this point only theoretical, she knew she had a fiery lust burning somewhere deep inside her. Daily, she felt that she tried to fight it, yet occasionally, the thoughts would get the better of her. And if she ever acted upon these urges, oh, how it would piss off Father. And it would piss Father off even more if it was with someone who wasn't a proper man. What about a Mexican? That got me. She had never seen one, but she had read about them often. Part of her delighted in how infuriated the notion would have made her father. Yeah. Her dabbling in the exotic would have destroyed his preconceived notions and his world. Is that going to be a problem?
Reading porn.
Yeah, that's true. But a larger part of her was excited by the idea of a pair of cinnamon hands touching her milky white breasts. Squeezing them, kissing them, suckling them sounded nice. A Mexican man's tongue dancing over her happy pink nipples. But in her fantasy, Mary needed a name for her imaginary Mexican man. She wanted a way to identify her mental lover. Perhaps if she had a nomenclature for him, it would make the fantasy more vivid. Although the idea of being taken by a stranger did strike her fancy, but no. Perhaps later. Daydreaming of sex with strangers was one thing, but nameless strangers? That was inappropriate for a Sunday evening walk in London. But what name? Something Mexican sounding, surely. Miguel? Luis? Ernesto? No. Pepe. The name made her giggle and linger on the phonetic delights it produced, and she decided it was a fabulous fit. No last name, though. No sense in making things weird. And with that, her mind had undressed Pepe. His brown skin, chiseled and defined. A side effect, she thought, of long hours working outside beneath a Mexican sun. Though she supposed the sun is technically the same everywhere. What a dumb whore. It just made her fantasy seem more romantic. To be born in foreign skies, regardless of the fact that all skies are single uniform entity, just sounds more exotic. And in this particular situation, more erotic. Her eyes tracked down his chest and perfectly formed abdomen, followed closely by her hands. Like a blind woman reading Braille, she took in every crevice and indention, every muscle and every formation. And then, Pepe did not disappoint. Pepe stood before Mary, nude. In her mind, at least. In her quiet, posh bedroom of her quiet, posh house, there stood a sweaty, naked Mexican man with a 7-inch treasure. With a 7-inch treasure waiting just for her. She could have made it larger. She could have made it smaller. But 7 inches just seemed to fit Pepe. Inexplicably, she was on her knees before him. In the same way that she studied herself some mornings, she was now studying Pepe's penis. Pepe's penis pulsated. Blood began to lift it. Mary imagined in her imaginings that the thought of her face down there took his manhood to a place beyond tantalization. She enjoyed tantalizing Pepe, and she thought she would enjoy even more touching Pepe. In her vivid imagination, she lightly traced her finger along the blue veins of his dangling cock, and as she traced every lightning bolt lurking beneath his brown skin, she could feel him become harder and harder. She could hear his breath racing. She could tell he was excited. And she longed for more of his enthusiasm. She opened her mouth wide. I'm so turned on, I can't read properly. Once, while reading the Kama Sutra, she had seen it depicted. But due to embarrassment, she had turned many of the pages rather rapidly. Unlike Mary, much of the knowledge of the book had been lost to her. Yet this image, it had stuck in her mind, perhaps more than any other. And in her fantasy, she was experiencing it. She imagined the taste was the same as sweat, a touch salty, but not unpleasant. Gingerly, she placed her lips around the tip. Sucking seemed the natural action, and based on Pepe's reaction, it was a wise choice. His euphoria drove her farther, and before long, all 7 inches were in her mouth. It was slow at first, cautiously taking more and more in. Mary thought, it's best not to overexert oneself. Take time and pride in your work. But the thought of feeling Pepe's cock dabbling at the back of her throat was intoxicating and proved to a strong... But the thought of feeling Pepe's cock dabbling at the back of her throat was intoxicating and proved too strong of a temptation for her reserve. Pepe rambled on in Spanish about something. Lord knows what he was saying. Mary did not. She imagined it was something to the effect of, yes, white girl, put my penis in your mouth more. That makes me feel good. And like a gracious host, she obliged. After all, Pepe had so kindly offered his 7 inches to Mary's fantasy. It seemed the least she could do. She relished in the thought of her lips moving up and down the shaft of Pepe's brown dick, leaving each throbbing blue lightning bolt moist with saliva. It became a game for her to see how slowly and smoothly she could go from the tip to the base. And so Mary, a girl who had a million magical things in her mind at all times, became fixated and completely preoccupied with one singular idea. Sucking Pepe the Mexican's cock. God damn it, Keith. So fixated, in fact, that she didn't realize there was an imaginary someone else in her imaginary room. They were inside of her now. Pepe was in her mouth, filling it, and someone was inside of her behind, stretching her apart. She couldn't see the penis, but from that feeling, teetering between pleasure and pain, that fantastical feeling was enough to let her know they were enormous, even bigger than Pepe. Her new lover was, Mary contemplated it, Ethiopian! His dark hands on her ivory hips, guiding himself into her welcoming loins. Pepe's bronze hands holding onto her bunned hair, directing her face up and down, and she didn't question when her clothes had come off, nor where they had gone, nor why she had instantly named her dark suitor Jub Jub. Fuck me! Oh, get it together, Trevor! Nor why he was wearing such an oversized straw hat. She merely allowed life, the fantasy, and the 2 exotic men to take her. The piercing sound of the horn shook her. She had almost stepped into the roadway. A car whizzing by was the first image that graced her as she jolted back into reality and the sidewalk in one simultaneous step. No more Pepe and Jub Jub. Only shame and confusion. Her fantasies had distracted her. She had been wandering around London for who knows how long, wandering aimlessly while her mind was being ravished by 2 foreign lovers. And where had that left her? With a crotch as wet as a freshly drawn bath and no idea where in the hell she was. To be continued. If you want to read Chapter 1, check out our website down below.